So, Kok Chian, it's really great to have you here for this family integrated care parent interview. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm Medina Thompson. I work at Bliss as the Information and Content Senior Officer. And this project about family integrated care, which is a model of care for babies born premature or sick, which promotes a culture of partnership and collaboration between parents and healthcare professionals who are working on the care of the babies that are in neonatal units. Um, the first thing I would ask is for you to introduce yourself, and then if you could tell me a bit about your neonatal experience.
Okay, thank you, Medina. My name is Kok Chian. You can call me Casey. I am a university tutor, and one of the key things that I want to join this research is I want to sort of look at my contribution and my experience in the neonatal care unit when our baby Ian was born in NICU. So one of the key things is that he was born on week 26, which means he is under the extremely premature category. And his stay was around 99 days before he went home oxygen free. So there was a bit of a anxiety together with anxiousness when he was in the unit itself. So he was also transferred to another hospital, the local hospital. So he also went through the neonatal transfer service, which is quite an experience for us. So yeah, I would listen to your prompts, Medina.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey. So I guess my first question would be, did you know what family integrated care was during your time in neonatal care? And I would say you were in two hospitals. So at the beginning, when you were in the first hospital, did you know what family integrated care was?
While we were at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, neonatal intensive care unit, we were introduced the term intensive care. So the family integrated care wasn't actually known at that time. So it was until we left there and got transferred to the local hospital, which is St. Mary's, and we actually knew about what the term family integrated care was. In hindsight, we realized that many of these practices are quite, usual. Like for example, kangaroo care, and then being included in the feeding and the daily cares, which is quite usual, and then receiving updates at rounds. So we think some of these are family integrated care while we were at the other hospital in Chelsea West, but we were not very clear at that time. So we sort of knew a little bit, but we weren't given a formal explanation of the concept. So we were just parents and, trying to be as integrated as possible, but not necessarily something that we know. And because, as parents, we're quite active and we want to be caregivers, so we didn't actually ask what it was, so we just went with it.
And do you think, as parents, that there were any barriers for you in being involved in the care of your son when, especially when you're in the first unit? And I guess the things that I would say to think about here are communication between yourself and the healthcare professionals, the way that they shared information,
Mm-hmm.
whether your family had needs that the healthcare professionals took into account or didn't take into account, shared decision making. You talked about shared caregiving and being
Mm-hmm.
involved in your son's cares. So those kind of things. Do you feel like there were barriers between you and Yarwen being involved in those things?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of barriers, and I'm just going to name sort of some of the biggest barriers that we see. So medical updates were often, during the rounds. So we work hard to sort of like be adaptive and be there when in the early morning when the doctors are doing their rounds. And sometimes we will tend to miss conversations because of the priority of different cares from different babies at the same time. So initially in the first few weeks it was very technical, so we didn't really understood what it was. Um, and it was quite hard to absorb under that kind of anxiousness and stress. So we took the communication as, things that are quite informational rather than something that's very empathic. So we just go with it whenever we see a doctor, and we try to sort of listen in. So that for us is the biggest barrier. And then we also look at how, upon reflection, we also look at how this individualized care versus our family needs were being supported. And we knew that the staff was always with us. And it means also that they are adaptive to the pace of the unit, and they're also working with us to give us the wider needs of things like when are we gonna check in. And they can say, they sort of say that you can come in anytime, but we would like you to be here at this time of the day, for the rounds. So it is nice, but sometimes if they're too busy, they just sort of like go and do their own work, and it's not always being considered for our well-being. But we knew it was an intensive part of the hospital, so we sort of say that it's all right. We just take care of it, and just sort of try to be flexible. So I mean, this kind of consideration is good. It's like we try to be adaptive, and we try to understand. So when there was a big decision like going from respiratory CPAP to high flow, um, like this is pretty much some of the things that was happening at that time. So we were quite happy that they share this kind of information with us, and the nurses are quite good in terms of empathic. They don't rush us. They just sort of frame it only in the necessary medical terms, and the doctors as well, so we don't feel rushed. So one of the key things that we understood from this experience was how we are doing this shared caregiving. So we were always encouraged to have kangaroo care, skin to skin, and then we're always encouraged to give the feeds, whether it's from the direct, from the tube, or we were giving it as a bottle, so we were always encouraged to do this, and we like to do this, to be honest. So we felt that we don't have to ask permission, we just need to sort of go up and do the work. Every time when the time was up, we just sort of like being seen as like the default partners of the integration and the care that was given to Ian. And the thing is that Ian doesn't have any grandparents, so it is probably quite a good thing that not a good. Well, I would say I don't know the answer to this, but he didn't really have any grandparents with him, so um, the family involvement is just me and my wife. But from our conversations with other babies, we knew that the grandparents wanted to visit, and sometimes you can't because it's a Category 3 unit, and it's quite a strict visiting rules, and we understood that this is for infection control, but I always thought it's kind of quite cruel not to give the grandparents a chance to visit the other babies. But so that was quite a good sort of like observation and reflection in terms of how this becomes a barrier for the wider family members. um, yeah, so we also think that we were quite fortunate because both of our work, myself and Yawen, were quite supportive. And for me, I'm given 6 months paid paternity leave, so which is unusual. And also, I think with the Bliss involvement, all this is coming to a fruitful sort of like departure this year, where it's not enacted in the law that you have 6 months paternity and so on and so forth. But when I first went into paternity, it was really fortunate that I have all this being paid for by my workplace. And because it was quite local to us, the hospital in Chelsea West and also in St. Mary's, we are quite happy to say that this is very unusual. Like we can be there quite late, and we can just sort of like focus on the care and the visits. But also, I think both hospitals has the rooming in units when they understand that if the parent is unable to do certain trips, they are offering some of the rooms. But it is pretty much a plus when Ian was about to leave the St. Mary's Hospital back home, where we are being offered the rooming in more and more often, so that we can have this kind of a good adaptation from the court into the more domestic environment within the hospital and then going home. That really helped us. So we also knew that some of the other babies doesn't have this. The parents don't have this, and they have to travel far. And we were quite shocked to hear that. Wow, this baby is from this and has to go all the way from here, and they have no place to park and all that. So I think some of these are, I think, the barriers to them, but I think it's also saying that there must be some sort of way to reduce this. But we understand that this is all part of um, the parenthood that we get when your child is in neonatal care, and everybody's quite supportive, I would say.
Thank you. I was actually going to talk about skin to skin or kangaroo care.
Hmm.
You've mentioned it a couple of times, and I kind of wanted to know about the first time that you had skin to skin with your son. And I'm interested in what your reservations were and how healthcare professionals helped you to overcome them.
Yeah. So the the first one was 2 days after he was born. So in fact, it was like a Saturday morning. So it was quite nice. So the matron came in and she said, "Well, I mean, you can do it." I was like, "Wow, there's so many cables coming out and tubes." So it was quite a thing. So we were helped by the chief matron. So she was very adaptive, and she came and she took things in her hands, and she moved Ian from the incubator, and then with all the cables coming out, so I had a good skin to skin for I think 3 hours, and it was pretty much I just didn't move, because it was so tiny. He was so tiny. He was like 730 grams, so it wasn't really anything on my chest, but I could feel that his heartbeat, and it was pretty much encouraging, and it was really framing around um, the way that you mimic like within the womb, although he's not in the womb, but this is almost like the best thing that ever happened. So in fact, I didn't do the kangaroo care for it. It was Yawen, so Yawen was carrying her, and then so she was a bit tired, after being in labor. So I took over, and I thought, oh wow, I could do it. So it was pretty good, and I thought the the time that was spent doing kangaroo care is also evident now that he's around 2.5, where he wants a lot of cuddles. Um, and we thought that it was just natural. But I think he sort of loves it as well, and then a lot of the extended things that we learn, cuddles and all that, is pretty much, I think, a derivative of the kangaroo care that we have while in the neonatal. Yeah. So it was quite a good thing for us to experience that, and it wasn't a big problem for us now. For us, we think that we never really understood what this kangaroo care was. We thought, okay, it was just to mimic the womb, but in fact, there's lots of good things that came out from it. Where the first thing is really about your smell and the more lovely things of the domestic environment coming into play, not just the medical needs and care, but it's almost a physiological and a psychological thing. So it was pretty much an experience, but it was good, and I would say from weird to good. It's later on it becomes an enlightenment. So it was pretty good. Yeah, so I would say that we love it. In fact,
I love that you remember when it was. I think that's really special.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said that initially you were kind of nervous because of all the wires and because of his size. What was it that made you feel comfortable to kind of overcome that?
Yeah, so initially we keep looking at the monitors. So, I mean, and then the nurses came and said, well, don't look at that. It doesn't matter. Even if the thing pops on, you're holding him. So you know that he's actually okay. Um, and we were given a lot of insurance from the nurses. And I think we never took them for granted, like they say the things that they say, but they are obviously quite um, sort of adaptive to this as well. They know that we are new and all that. So one of the key things is that we got a lot of reassurances from the matron. So she came in there and then, do the work. All the nurses come in, they do the supportive work. And because it was a Sunday, that was the third day. So everything became quite easy. And I think because we were sort of seeing this as a practice. Um, but later on, we just felt it's quite natural. We just go to the cot, go to the incubator, we take him up by ourselves, and sometimes we don't need permission to do that. We just do it. We know where the cables are and all that. Yeah, there were certain parts which is a little bit difficult, like for example, because if he's intubated, then it gets quite difficult with the feeding. But other than that, the checks in the morning and in the evening makes him quite, vulnerable to the little, nuances of it, and he can be quite agitated sometimes. So we try to avoid that period when he's doing the blood gas in the early morning and the late evening. So we sort of becoming more open to it. Yeah, it was memorable. It is still quite fresh at the back of my mind. Yeah.
So you mentioned that other parents that were on the unit,
Mm,
their babies had grandparents who weren't allowed to visit.
mm,
Were there other needs that you had as a family that were religious or cultural, or
mm,
even just things that you wanted as a family, as a couple,
mm.
for your son that you wanted taken into account by the healthcare professionals? Was there anything specific, like yeah, was there anything that you needed as a family?
Mm. Yeah, so there were a lot of times where we understood what it was. Sometimes explanation is very clear, but it's just quite technical in terms of what it was all about. Like basically technical terms that we didn't really understand, and they explain it to us, and we say, okay, nice, we understand, but we are still quite stressed with it. So, and obviously this is not like a timetable where you have a route to recovery. It's always the next thing again. So although we like the emotional support from them, but we also like that maybe there's a little bit more of like a timeline to it. And in fact, there is a timeline because we were shown an app while we were at St. Mary's. There's a neonatal app where it talks about the duration of your stay versus the time that you were in the unit and when you're expected to leave and all that. So we think this is pretty good. Um, but sometimes if we're not there and we miss the rounds, or just because there's something more important going on, then we would love to have the healthcare professionals coming in to give us maybe written summary. It'd be quite nice to have a little thing there to talk about it. Of course, you can't write it and put it in front of the court, but it's kind of quite nice. And also, the fact is that there is always a change of shift. So sometimes, people have to leave, and it's kind of quite emotional maybe that day for that person, for that healthcare professional. Then we don't get the regular check-ins like we have. So it's a little bit of everything, but we would love to have a little bit more of a roadmap, of a timeline, and then being able to sort of like perhaps the final date to it. Yeah, we sort of see the final end to the unit almost like within 88 days. because we left at 99 days, so it's almost like 10 days before we left. We know that we're gonna leave soon. And basically, I'm just counting the days. As you can tell, I remember the days very clearly because he was discharged one day before his expected due day, which is 99 days. Yeah, so it's a very important day. So he's got two birthdays, so we will say celebrate two birthdays. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so that's how I felt that we could make this a little bit better, yeah, for us.
Yeah. And I guess that's a bit to do with communication
Yeah,
because it's, yeah, and sharing that information with you in a way that is accessible and
yes,
and you have mentioned before about the anxiety that you understandably felt during that time, and that does create more difficulty in understanding new things because you're scared for your
yeah.
son's life. So yeah, okay. Um, now that you've had the experience that you had, do you think of family integrated care in a different way? Like, what does
Mhm.
partnership in care mean to you now after having your experience? Like, what about it do you think is important and why?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question because I think we're now reflecting upon the process and the whole thing that family integrated care is about partnership. So this whole integration partnership means us as parents being recognized as an essential part of the team. So we're not just some parents, but we would together with the medical team, and we were just one big family, and it's not just overlooking their shoulders doing the work that they're doing, but we're also doing the work because we are the parents. And I think this is really about. I mean, this partnership is really about empowering families, like us, with knowledge, all the medical terms, and also encouraging us to do involvement hands-on with our babies. And I think at a certain point of time, this partnership also means that it's a respect that's given, so we don't override their requests or their instructions. We just respect them by saying this is it. We know that that's not going to happen, so we just oblige, and it's kind of quite an amicable kind of thing. We don't raise our voice and all that, although it's quite uh, you know tense at certain times, when things are happening. And because we're there, they also offer their well-being psychologist for us, and they are quite supportive of this emotional aspect of parenting. So it also gives us this opportunity to look at the partnership from our point of view, where we are also, if we feel tense, it also means that the baby will feel tense too, because we're doing a lot of skin to skin. So it does a lot of encouragement, to be able to offer that kind of support at that level. And they come into the unit, we don't step out of the unit to see them. So it's kind of quite nice that they are part of it. Um, Ultimately, I think this partnership really means that we are not just parents, we're not just parents, we're just partners, we work together, we are integrated. We're just not a medical team member. We just have to sort of look at the way things are happening, and we just try to offer our help and all that. And it's been quite useful. I mean, it's been quite successful as well for us because we, being trying to be pregnant for many years, we see this as an opportunity to know in depth about our baby and the needs, from the very beginning. We were just not expecting this to be extremely premature, this pregnancy. We were just sort of like thinking maybe it's just like 2 weeks. But he's a tiny one, 26. So we think this partnership is kind of quite useful because we build up a lot of friends along the way, and also other families. And we recently went back to do 15 steps, which is part of what Chelsea and Wes is doing right now in another research. So this means a lot. So we'll be continuing this kind of partnership. Um, well, I mean, in unforeseeable future. Yeah.
Mm. You said that you made or met a lot of other families
Mhm.
who had neonatal experiences. How instrumental were they in your journey, having people that understood and kind of got the situation? Because the thing about neonatal care is that lots of people don't know anything about it. Um,
Mhm.
so it can be difficult to find people who understand.
Yeah. So because as a dad, I felt quite isolated. Like mommy does a lot of things. Mommy does expressing, mommy does the thing, and one of the main tasks that I have is to wash certain things that needs to be washed, especially the expressing equipment. So I can feel like quite useless at certain times, to be honest. So meeting a parent in the washing area means a lot for me. And it also means that we can exchange quite informally about the stages, and we try to understand where this, other, babies trying to get to, and we also share our experience. So the support that we give each other informally in front of a sink, doing the wash ups is quite interesting. And I think London is pretty amazing as well because you see a lot of families who are perhaps maybe single parents, and you would also have the LGBT community with us. And I think it's kind of quite nice that we support each other, regardless of all these differences. We think this is always a good thing. Um, and and for me, it's an eye opener because I didn't knew what it was. Because there's a tendency for certain specific groups to have neonatal babies or premature babies, and and we recognize this in a very sort of like succinct manner, and medically it's kind of quite useful to know. Um, it's not banter. It's more. It's about support rather than just talking about gossip and all that. It's not that. It's like it's a very encouraging thing, and it also means that people are a little bit more open because they see you working with them, not against them, so they're quite free, they're quite open. Sometimes it involves a lot of translation in terms of understanding because they might experience different differences to yours. For example, one of the things is that different gestation, then you have different types of treatment. And because you're yourself firstborn, maybe they have another two more babies at home. So the siblings is another interesting thing that we have. And I think for us, the support is quite direct. It's just one to one with our babies. But for them, there's also a need for them to have childcare and all that when they are in the unit. So um, yeah, it is important. So we have good conversations. We still talk to some of them, which is quite unusual. Sometimes we attend charities events, and then they were there. So yes, I think this is pretty much like friends for life, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that understanding and that support is definitely invaluable. Yeah. Um, you talked about being a father as opposed to being a mother in that experience, and that it felt particularly isolating,
Hmm.
and also that you felt not necessarily sure what your role was or what you were there to do and support your son. Um, are there any other differences you feel, and are there things that can be done, do you think, by healthcare professionals and other charities to help non-birthing parents to feel more, I guess, empowered?
Yeah. So we were kind of quite fortunate to have everything under one roof. In fact, everything under one floor in Chelsea West. So when Ian first came out, it also means that she has the opportunity to visit the baby, although physically she's very weak, you know. So initially, I was the one who kept going into the neonatal intensive care unit, and then slowly, when she recovered her strength, she came in. So the most rewarding thing was that we had colostrum within the first few hours, and I was holding this liquid gold, walking around with this little tube in there, and I felt really useful. But slowly, I felt like maybe I'm just sort of standing around doing all the washings and all. So I sort of recover a little bit of my confidence when I sort of look at the larger picture, which is again quite natural, you know, in terms of support, like, you know, the skin to skin. Um, I mean, later on when we in St. Mary's, it's all about changing the nappies, you know, trying to understand how to change nappies. Although it's quite tiny, so the nappies is not so necessary. Well, it is necessary, but it's like, well, the pool is not much. And because all this shared caregiving tasks also makes it quite time consuming because you got to buy the nappies, you know. I mean, where do you buy size zero? It's kind of, you know. So yeah, so I ran around. Oh, when I first bought it, I was like, wow, okay, I could buy this tiny nappies around the corner. So that took a little bit off my mind. So trying to do the technical stuff, you know, all the logistics of getting orders, and I feel quite proud, you know, like being able to sort of source nappies for the first time. So and then later on, it was really about taking care of like the small little things, like how much milk is going into the tube and all that. Although it's been, you know, catered for, it's always a good thing to know that you are there to do the work. Um, and I remember very fondly the first time when he had the bottle and the teats collapsed. So he was actually sucking nothing for 50 minutes, and half an hour later, the whole thing still hasn't gone into the body. So the whole bottle of milk is, is not working, and we had to throw them away because it's like out there for half an hour. So it's a lot of those kind of things that I felt a little bit disappointed, but because technically it's quite rewarding when you see them drink. So it was that kind of little things that makes it quite useful for us. So for me, I think it's all about the feed, you know, the milk, the nappies, and then for Yawan, she's always giving her breast milk. So this really helps the two kinds of bonding that we are trying to achieve, mom and dad. And until today, he's still going on mom's breast for comfort and all, which is quite interesting. So we we are I'm less guilty now, so I know that there's lots of things that's happening. But upon reflection of what happened was, I was very little in terms of involvement in the daily, you know, like the breastfeeding. But I was a little bit more involved and a little bit more empathic towards myself and a little bit less forgiving for myself in the beginning. But now I'm feeling a little bit better because I know that okay, these are all the things that count, and I just need to do it. Yeah. So yes, it is definitely quite a journey and something to remember. Yeah, when you have the cares that are meant for mums and dads, they are
Mm.
quite different. Yeah, for the baby.
But I suppose being involved is what helped you to grow your confidence as a parent and as a
Yeah,
father, and you know, like your story of having to source the smallest nappies,
yeah,
that's being involved and that's looking after your baby. So, you know, those are the things that have built you up and probably make you the parent that you are today.
yeah. That's definitely a thing that we learn. Yeah, so it's kind of key that we did the things that we're supposed to do, you know, like because I think we're quite fortunate to have all the resources around us, and being in central London in Paddington is kind of quite a plus. But again, buying things can be quite difficult. But there is something in a nearby drugstore and all that. So there is things that can be very difficult to get, but we
Mm,
were quite fortunate, and I think it's kind of quite nice to be. I mean, like reflecting upon it, it's like really good to say that this is, one of the best things. I don't have to wait for like, online delivery and all. So it's kind of quite a good
mm,
thing for us. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I suppose my last question is really about tips for other neonatal families who are in the situation that you were in, which was that you arrive on NICU, you don't really know what's going on. You might have heard of family integrated care, you might not have, but you're being told that for the good of your baby, you should be as involved in a partner in your baby's care. What kind of tips would you have for parents who are, you know, apprehensive because, as you said, it's a tiny baby, or the baby's unwell, or they're just nervous in general because they don't necessarily know what they're doing? What kind of tips would you have for them to get involved and be partners?
Yeah. So, I, yeah, I think each and every baby is different. So I think some of the things that we've experienced might not be relevant for other neonatal intensive care baby, but we we think it's going to be interesting for this question. So I gather about 7, 8 tips here. I think one of them, or the most important, I would say, is to be there, to be present as much as you can, um, because the key thing is that sometimes you need the support, and sometimes your neighbor, might help you to do certain things, and because of your presence, you have all these small little touches that can help. And I think the voices in those units are always about the bleeps and the long, rhythms of machines, beeping in the background. So I think hearing a human voice that your baby can recognize in the long run is kind of quite interesting. So I think we try to be as present, and I think if parents can, with the support of the neonatal act, I think it's really good. That parents get 6 months of support. I think the presence would really be very important for the baby. Um, so we asked a lot of questions when we were there. So I think we, we are not really guilty about asking questions. Like we ask questions, and because I'm also a university tutor, so I would always ask students if there's any question for me. So I would like to ask questions. So my main thing is to say that if, as a parent, if you think that you're not going to ask anything, and you just want to only get it when you want to get it, then I think it's a missed opportunity, because um, you will inevitably need to ask questions, and don't afraid to ask them more than once, because I think most of the healthcare professionals, they are really willing to repeat the medical terms many times if you don't understand. A lot of people are shy. I think they don't ask questions because they feel guilty. Um, but I wouldn't do that. So I think a good tip would be to ask questions, so that you know that's that's going to happen, and you have a peace of mind. It reduces your anxiety, and it's actually better for your well-being. Um, we also took a lot of notes. So for other parents, this is a good tip, I think, because I mean you would write down your daily tasks, important tasks. So I think taking notes is good as well, because you help track the progress of your baby in intensive care, and it gives you this engagement that you need, for later decision. So it's almost like this chronological thing that helps me 1 to 99 is really helpful because it's always like, okay, what happened to me during this time? I use little post-it notes. I do it. I still have them. And I know exactly who came in, the nurses. So I send them postcards every year, um, based on the notes that I was, given. And it's quite true that they've given us quite a good support. So I think taking notes, knowing who did what, is actually a good thing because you're engaged and you know that this is going to be tracking good progress. And also, I said earlier, skin to skin. So if you can do it, I think we didn't do a marathon. They were saying that people can do it for 6 hours. But I thought we need to pee, so we didn't do 6 hours. So we thought, I think we did like 3 to 4 hours. But it became quite a thing, when there's less intubation or when there's less tubes, we hold longer. Um, so initially because Yawen was quite frail, so she didn't do the long thing. She has to rest, but I did the chance and I tried to do long ones. But ultimately, the role sort of reversed a little bit. It's all about breastfeeding. So she did a lot of cuddles and breastfeeding. So it's a lot more for her. So the skin to skin is really important because it actually gets to the point where it's like a need, and it's for us it's a type of healing. So we felt like we can heal him. I think skin to skin. It felt a little bit weird in the beginning. You take off your clothes, but we were fine. We thought it's all right, but we have to respect others. Of different religions, so we do it under screens and all that. Yeah, so we encourage people to do skin to skin as much as they want. Um, so the last important tips is probably to say that you you're being supportive. Whether you are alone or you see other parents doing the work, it's always nice to have space for yourself, space for them. So although you try to support each other, I think it's also nice that maybe moms and dads in those care would need their own space to process all this information because it's good to talk and sometimes it gets overwhelmed and you need to know when to stop. So these are the things that I think is kind of quite nuanced. Um, and I think by taking part in the survey, it also means that there's a lot that Bliss can offer in terms of the networks and the charities. And I think when I talk about the support, it's within the unit itself and with the available charities out there. Bliss is one. You have Cosmic, and the support will try to normalize your experience. But it's very difficult to just sort of say, well, it is normalized now, but we understand that this connection, especially through the charity unions and all that, we understand that this is really imperative. So at the back of our minds, the support is beyond just the society or the healthcare professionals. It's like you guys, Blaze, coming out and giving us all these little useful things, through social media. I get a lot of things from social media, and I just go up and I click. And it's kind of quite nice to say that the support is always mutual, and there's always assurance. Um, so we think that this is probably the most important thing, or the most important tip that we want to talk to other neonatal parents about, in terms of the care that you receive. The support from charities like this is pretty much a thing that you need to have. I know a lot of people tend to shy away with it in the beginning. They just sort of like look at it and they just skim past it. But they do this understanding later on quite quite quickly they know that okay, we got to get involved, and all that. Which I see the long list of support from Bliss, which is from parents of Bliss, in the columns,
Mm,
it's really important, yeah, and I think it's kind of quite nice to see some of the experiences.
yeah. Thank you for those tips. Very comprehensive, very helpful, I think, to other families who are new to or even have already had a neonatal experience and are still, these things stay with you. So, many things will make you think of them again, negative and positive. So, like you said, it is really important to get support where there is support there for you. Do you have any tips for healthcare professionals in, and this is my final question, in helping parents to understand why family integrated care is important? I suppose that's interesting from your point of view in that you didn't necessarily know what it was in your first hospital, and you did in your second, and that was a bit to do with your son's actual status of like how poorly he was and how small he was, and um, but do you think there are things that healthcare professionals could have told you that would have made you think, oh, family integrated care is very important, and I see that.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about things. I mean, we do understand that there's a lot of information going on between doctors and nurses and support team. So one key thing is always about providing written summaries of updates. We think this will be quite useful, so that they don't miss things. It's almost like they share the things that's written down for them. But I think it's quite medical when you see a lot of the notes that they write. Um, so this would have made quite a big difference, if there is a thing that we need to do. And it's also, for us, I think it's also seen as a form of encouragement when they speak to us. But it's not necessarily framed as encouragement. They sort of use the informative bits. But for me, I see it as active encouragement where when they talk about things, they're saying, okay, you do that, or we are going to do this because it makes that better. So we think there's two little things. These two little things are quite good when they talk about it, when they write things down, um, and also they're not they're not against us coming in late, like middle of the night or like 5 in the morning. And I think this flexibility is really good for us because we wanted to spend more time, and we felt like these sessions can be quite limited during certain times of the day because other families with other babies might be around. So for us, we think the flexibility of visiting hours is good, and also reflecting upon other families which has siblings, it might be good as well. So I think this openness is helping us bridging the gap of the tension of, oh no, we have to leave by 8 o'clock and all that, which is not true. So this is pretty good. Like they gave us the full control of the time. The only thing that they talk about is that if you are too tired, it also makes it quite dangerous for you, to drive and all that, which can be, not a good thing. So I mean, I think it's like within the safety limits of what you do, you can come and go as much as you want and at what time that suits you. Um, Also, for the fact that I mentioned earlier, we talk about the rooming in. You have units that are being supported by charities like you guys. You gave a lot of funds to certain units, hospital units, where you build rooms, you build little accommodation support, and these are very useful for my understanding because some of the charities I know they have this facility where the parents can use. In fact, I've stayed there for like a couple of nights when we were so tired, and when we need to bring him home, we can't sleep in that room. But slowly, because of all this charity work, we are now able to get accommodation that is like domestic, within the reach of like 5 minutes away or 2 minutes away, and this would have saved us the traveling, and also for some other families which are maybe in dire straits, they travel from far places, and they have to go back again. So this might be a good way to think about how this can be supported a little bit more. Yeah, so I think the rest is pretty much what I said earlier, like the flexibility, like the encouragement, and also the written little pieces of notes for us when we're not around. It'd be quite nice, but I'm not saying that they have to do everything, but it's just the way to sort of reduce that anxiety. But there's
Yeah,
a different role, with charities, and then there's a different role with the medical professionals. So we sort of respect that in terms of the needs and the times of the day, and where we are in the process of um, um, discharge and all that. Yeah. So it
yeah.
changes every time, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I
Yeah.
suppose communication when you're not on the unit is just as important as when you are there to
Yeah.
be at ward rounds, etc.
Yeah.
Because the times when you're not there, you obviously want to know what's happening with your baby. So
Yeah.
that is very important. And in terms of accommodation, obviously, as you mentioned, that's policy that Bliss has really campaigned to make more available for all parents. But like you said, especially for parents who can't travel or live far away, and also things like traveling when you're exhausted and things like that, to be able to have better access and to be partners in your baby's care is really important, that you're able to be there full stop, because many people
Exactly.
aren't. So yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to sort of conclude by saying, I mean, we someone said this to me. I can't remember who it was, but says about he says about this is like a not it's not a sprint, it's like a marathon, and then it's almost like it's you're running for, you're not even running a marathon, it's like life, it's this whole thing. Can't remember what I'm trying to say, but I read it somewhere. Maybe it's through one of your stories. And it's kind of quite interesting where it's one thing against the other, which is all about the support from charities that are really, focusing on this kind of neonatal babies, which is pretty unique in this part of the world and also many parts of the other worlds. But we truly believe that this is a good cause, and we are very happy to be part of some of this journeys, and able to contribute in any way that we can within our limits. Yeah, it's very interesting to see what your work is, and the hospital's work, and I think it's kind of quite admirable that most of you are doing the work that you are doing. So, yeah,
Well, thank you very much for your time and for sharing so openly your experiences, and kind of what you think could help others, which is even is so important, and also difficult to learn from something that was difficult,
yeah,
and traumatic for your family. But I'm happy that you've been able to share with us, and that hopefully it can help other families and healthcare professionals to help those families as well. So thank you very much, Casey. I will be in touch, and have a great rest of your day.
okay. Thank you, Medina, and
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Speak soon. Bye.